morning. Our first up is special education audit update.
Yeah, all of us. You guys know.
I think there's some looking in here like they're afraid to come in. Okay.
If you are fully vaccinated and you are staying socially distant, you may remove your masks.
So again, special education audit update is on the first on the hit parade.
So first, I'm first.
Okay, okay. All right, Craig has the slideshow.
Oh, so big. Jeez. There we go. It's almost too big.
You can go to the next one. So what I did was I took our special education audit that was done last spring, and I took some pieces from the different recommendations that were made in the 24 recommendations and kind of highlighted the things that I've worked on with our department this year. So the first one was they talked about the perception of miscommunication and the lack of support for staff, students, and parents by central office administrators overseeing the special education department. So some of the things that I've done this year is each month I go to each building and meet with the PLC teams to build relationships with our staff.
PLC team.
It's professional learning communities. So the special ed team, including the building principal, is at that meeting each month when I go to each building. We also I meet regularly with all the building administrators throughout each month. I've been attending a lot of ETR and IEP meetings and trying to support staff with some of the major changes that have been happening in the department and some of the challenges as well. And I've created a Google Classroom for special education staff, including administrators, that I put resources on there for them. If there's any legislation changes, anything like that goes on the Google Classroom. So another audit recommendation, which was D and number 7, was the need for clear communication from central office. And some of the examples that they gave was considering one-on-one aids, how co-teaching is being utilized at each level, and the role of the intervention specialist at the elementary and the secondary buildings preparing for IEP meetings. So this has been happening since the start back in August with consistency. And I think that's a big key, that there wasn't a lot of consistency in the past. And all staff was given, and I brought a copy in case you wanted to take a look at it. Every staff member received a binder that has all types of resources in there for them so that they can refer to that when they're writing IEPs or they have questions about meetings, how to conduct themselves, how to write a PR1, which is a prior written notice that you have to give after every meeting. So if any of you want to take a look at that. Also, I created a launch pad, and I don't know if you want to click on it. Oh, darn it. Well, I guess I can't show it to you because I can't give you access right at this moment. So anyway, the launch pad it's everything put in one space, and it's broken up into 9 categories. So there might be like how to write IEP goals, stuff about ESY, stuff about adding paraprofessionals. There's stuff about writing PR1s, and then there's different resources. There's another 9 boxes for the different disability categories and resources teachers might need to look for to how to meet the needs of the students who maybe are identified as intellectual disability or autism, and some good resources for them. Talking about the continuum of services, which was recommendations B and number 6, the audit recommended a review of the gap of the elementary school spectrum of services for students with disabilities and their least restrictive environment. And this year, looking at the 3 buildings, there wasn't consistency across the 3 buildings in what we were doing. For example, Chippewa had all pull-out, it was all resource room. At Hilton, it's all push-in co-teaching. And in Highland, there's a mixture. There's co-teaching, there's resource room, there's self-contained units. So I've worked with the staff over at Chippewa and with Kim Taylor, our instructional coach this year, working with the 2 intervention specialists there on how to co-teach and pushing them more into the classroom instead of pulling all the students out, because that might not be their least restrictive environment. Over at Hilton, where we're doing all push-in, there are some students that are struggling in the inclusion setting. So we are working on how do we pull out students, work on a specific strategy, and then put them back in the classroom to have that balance of services across all 3 buildings. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about the year after, when we go into one building, that everybody is familiar what co-teaching looks like, what a resource room looks like, and what a self-contained unit looks like. And when we decide and how we decide what students need to be in which setting.
Are you saying that the special needs teacher goes into the classroom, the general education classroom?
Yes.
With the, okay.
In a co-teaching model, the special education teacher goes into the classroom with the general education teacher, and they should be working side by side together, not like the special education teacher may be standing in the back of the room waiting for some prompting. They should be both teaching. They should be working with different groups of students. And it doesn't necessarily mean that an intervention specialist is working just with students with IEPs. There may be a student who doesn't have an IEP who's struggling on a specific topic in the classroom, so that when they break up into groups, they may pull that student into the group to work on that specific skill.
So does that mean that the special needs teacher also has to be current on what's going on in the general education side too?
They should be collaborating with their general education teachers, and working, in a good co-teaching model. They should be planning together, planning lessons together. And I know that there's still some work that has to be done on that model in some of our buildings, and that's something that we're working on.
I think one of the challenges is the general ed teacher needs to be coached on how to work with the intervention.
I agree.
Because a lot falls on those interventionists. They sit in the back because they don't want to overstep their bounds coming into that classroom. So, I don't know who's doing that modeling, but, just having done this coaching thing for the last 2 years, you have to go in, and I was actually coaching general ed teachers on how to work with the interventionists at times, because especially in a building where they were pulled out, they've never done this.
And I agree with you that, I think there are some teachers that are more open to it. There are some teachers that are better at it than others. But I think, with the proper coaching that we can all get there, because we're there to meet the needs of all of our students. It shouldn't be your students and my
So
students.
who's helping the general ed teachers?
Well,
Mr. Martin, is he working with the general ed teachers coming in and talking about what this looks like? Because, you know what I mean? Like that's the challenge. The lesson plans need to be done early enough that they can differentiate, and that,
No, and I understand.
It seems not to happen.
And I agree with you. This was something that we had started probably in around January this year, and it was trying to help the intervention specialists be comfortable even walking into the classroom. So in the next year, everything can't be solved in a year. This is a multi-year process. And, with some of the changes that are happening in our elementary buildings with administration, I think it's something that, we will absolutely address next year as a whole, not just the special education department. So looking at staffing, is based on data from the national, state, and local school districts. There were some staffing level adjustments in some areas. So some of the things that we're addressing is the anticipated hiring of an additional coordinator and the instructional coach position being eliminated. Looking at our aides in our classrooms and really focusing on what the need for, when do we provide an aid to a student? And that's something that I guess we've really had to work on this year. And I don't know if you're going to need access, but you can try clicking on that one and see what happens. Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. So what I created this year was guidelines on how to request additional aid support. Because I think a lot of times when a student is struggling either academically or is struggling with behavior, sometimes people's first response is, well, let's just provide an aid to help that student. So the guidelines here really take a look at why do we provide, when do we provide aid service to a student? And what is the process that we go through in order to provide aid service to a student? Now, when a teacher is looking to add aid service for a student, they would have to fill out the whole packet that's here, which includes observations by a school psychologist, recommendations by the building principal, and meetings to discuss what is the goal of the aid to be there. So for our students that currently have aides, what we've done this year is, as their IEP meetings come up, the intervention specialist then has to fill out a form. It's a continued need for aid support and work on an independence plan, because we don't want to provide aid support to a student, just say in first grade, and they're still in 12th grade needing that person with them, because they have to learn how to be independent. So the independence plan they have to write is, how are we going to eventually fade out that service? And, for example, we have a high school student who they're in the process of fading out the aid service. So the way they're looking at it, instead of, if it's a 9-period school day, is every few weeks pulling that aid away from one period of the day and then collecting data to make sure that they're still being successful in the classroom. So that's some of the ways that we're looking at how do we address, aids, the amount of aids that we have in our district, which is high. We had 65 aids in the district of, with 378 students identified. That's a high number, of a high ratio. I came from a school district with 900 plus IEP students and only 44 aides. So, it was something that needed to be addressed this year.
Why do you think that was? Do you think because we didn't have a process for it?
I think probably that there was no process, and if I don't know, because I wasn't here. I can only make assumptions, and I think, I don't think anybody was doing anything wrong. I think that people believe that was a way to solve a problem.
So it was written in the IEP.
It is.
And so did this process exist before what you just had here? Here are the steps for requesting aid. Did they have something like that?
No.
Or is this new?
That is new this year.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the little bullet point at the very bottom, behavior specialists for?
So, there was also, it was cited in the audit that the need for behavior specialists within the district. And I'm going to talk about it in a later slide of our contract with Red Oak.
Okay.
So one more thing.
Sure.
So why did we switch from having an instructional coach to a coordinator? Because that's higher level. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, because a coordinator, I feel we need somebody with an administrative license who can attend meetings as a district representative, and that's again to help support our building principals and teach them the skills that they need in order to feel that they can run that IEP meeting or ETR meeting without having to call me every time a question comes up. So it's working with them and empowering them to have.
So that person is a direct report to you, is that correct?
Correct.
You evaluate that person? Is that
I would be,
correct?
yes.
So the instructional coach goes away.
Correct.
So who is the instructional coach? Who is instructing our teachers on?
And that would be this coordinator position would do that as well with myself, and we would kind of split that, kind of a divide and conquer, whether the pupil service coordinator just say is going, has better skills at a higher level or an elementary level. They may be working with the building principals at the middle and high school, and I may be working with the building principals at the elementary level, or vice versa, and the preschool, and working with them together, and then at the same time helping coach those intervention specialists and spending more time in the buildings. One of the things that I found challenging this year was most of our meetings for like IEPs and ETRs are all at the same time in every building. So I can't be in 5 buildings attending meetings as a district representative if all the meetings are happening at 8 o'clock in 5 buildings. So this way, if the coordinators, you know, at one level and I'm at the other, we can work on that. So with mental health, we signed a contract this year with Red Oak Health and Wellness. Currently we have two behavior coaches. One works at the elementary level, splits the 3 elementary buildings, and one is split between the middle and the high school. And next year, through the SCUSA Foundation, they have agreed to pay for a third behavior coach. So we'll split it even more because the needs within the building for the behavior coaches has just grown and grown, and you know, the needs for the students, you know, so they're there to coach teachers when students are struggling with behavior in the classroom. They work with them on strategies that they can use within the classroom, but they also work with our students and they do home visits as well. So the goal for next year with the third person is probably to split it between Hilton and the middle school. So one would be at Highland in Chippewa, one would be at Hilton in the middle school. And the need is so great at the high school that they would just have their own behavior coach there. We also have through Red Oak one licensed clinician who, you know, it's an insurance-based, you know, by referral. And next year with our contract that we have, we'll have 2 licensed clinicians. And next year, they're also adding, it's called iCare Mentoring. And that comes with our contract, which is, that is a mentoring program that Red Oak is in charge of. They will be working with the community to they train mentors to work with students one-on-one that are in need. And those will be based on referrals from Red Oak, from the behavior coaches. And their goal is to get 20 volunteers within the district. They reach out to the different businesses and community partnerships. And they do some training with them. They're fully trained before they start working with students. So that's just another piece of our contract that we had already signed that will start next year.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yeah.
Before we go back to the Red Oak clinicians that are being provided to our students, are those clinicians on staff or are those then outsourced?
They're outsourced, but they're here every day.
So
So
contracted for a year, is that correct?
we signed a 3-year contract with Red Oak.
Okay.
So empowering leadership again is, you know, the audit stated that building principals need to be empowered to be engaged directly. And, you know, again, this is through clear direction and communication with principals. You know, again, I meet with building principals on almost a regular basis. I'm talking to the building principals almost every single day. Again, they attend our PLC meetings that we have at each building each month. And I try to focus on one topic at our nuts and bolts meeting that we have each month. IEP compliance. So they found that there were some compliance issues that led to due process complaints against the district. And we've done a lot of work on this year on IEP compliance. In my last district, we were chosen by the state to be audited by the state. So I went through a state audit last year and we provided a lot of professional development to our staff, which we were required to do in order to be compliant according to the state. So taking the information that I had learned last year and working with our staff this year, we've done that through professional development on IEP writing. My plan for next year is to create, it's called an iterator team. And that would be a team that would consist of building administration and some teachers and related service staff. They would be trained in what is a compliant IEP. And as a team, we would be picking IEPs, putting it through that iterator process to look for compliancy and to help support the teachers if they're not writing compliant IEPs. And, you know, and this helps avoid due process. You know, when there is a complaint, you know, we go to mediation and, you know, we start pulling documents. If our PRO1s are not written properly, if our IEPs aren't written properly, there's no way we can, you know, we stand a chance if things aren't done right. So we want to make sure that we are writing compliant IEPs. And again, it's to meet the students' needs as well.
And that professional training beforehand or in the past was just lacking, or from an administrator's training perspective.
I don't know what would, honestly, I never met our prior director, so there was no transition to talk about what was done and what wasn't done. So I can only go by what I've seen coming into the position and knowing where the needs are and providing that ongoing training to staff this year.
Can you explain that tiering special ed staff on your last slide?
Oh, so one of the things when you have, when you go through a state audit, the second part of the process after you go through, when they review your records and you make all the corrections to things that are cited as not being done compliantly, the next part of the process is to make sure that staff continue to write compliant IEPs. So in the process in my previous district was after we did all of that, then you create an iterator team and then you tier your special education, your intervention specialists and your related service staff where, you might look at it as like a tier 1, 2, 3 and how compliant they write an IEP. So a person who would be a tier 1, that would be your best compliant IEP writers, would maybe have to turn in an IEP once a semester to you for review. Teachers that would be on a tier 2 might have to turn in their IEPs once a month. And tier 3, those are the teachers that need the most support, and they would have to turn in every IEP to you for review before a meeting.
Oh, okay.
So I have a question about Red Oak. How do our teachers feel about Red Oak?
I will be able to tell you that tomorrow because we are having a meeting with Red Oak, our building principals, our school counselors, and our school psychologists tomorrow to talk about the things that went well and things we can do better next year. That's tomorrow morning.
Because some of the challenges with having an outside entity, they are not able to write those IEPs. So some of these things that need to be worked on, they're not contributing to that IEP. So
Well, they are because
so how are they accountable? How is Red Oak accountable?
because a lot of times we write them into the IEP as support for school personnel. And so they're consulting with teachers or consulting with the student. If there's a behavior goal, they can be listed as a provider. We don't put Red Oak staff, we just put behavior coach. So because, we wouldn't have, just if we severed our contract with them, but we can tie a goal to a behavior coach. And then they would be required to collect that data that when they work with the student and give it to the intervention specialist.
So the question, are we approving, I didn't see the Red Oak contract today.
No, that was approved last year and it was for 3 years.
For 3 years. Okay, so it says, so if we're not happy with Red Oak,
We can cancel it. We can break our contract.
okay. I want to make sure that our teachers are finding it useful.
Sure.
I've seen behavior specialists work out well, but I've also seen it not work out well. And I just would like to know because you're right. That is like a major thing. If it's going well,
Sure.
it's the most helpful thing ever. But if it's not,
And I know that the behavior coaches sent out their own through Red Oak survey to staff 2 weeks ago. Now, those results will be shared with me when I meet with Red Oak tomorrow after we're meeting Red Oak, their supervisor, the behavior coaches, and like I said, building principals, school psychologists, and school counselors, we're all meeting together tomorrow to talk about how the year went. And if there are still concerns, how can we make it better moving into next year?
the idea, are we getting the same people? Is it
The same people are coming back next year with the addition of one new person.
So the reason we have Red Oak this year is because when we did the survey, as part of that, the teachers all expressed that they weren't happy with our previous provider. So we went out and looked for a new provider. So this is the first year we have them, but it was based on teacher feedback of not being happy with the provider that we had prior to Red Oak.
Which is why I'm asking. The other idea is why don't we just have our own? Why are we outsourcing it?
It's a possibility, but
we know that this problem's always going to exist.
Oh, absolutely.
This behavior issue, and it's much more expensive for us to send children out. So for us to have these behavior coaches that are ours, I just am wondering, I'm asking you, why are we
Well,
contracting?
A couple of the nice things that come with the Red Oak contract is, Red Oak, both our behavior coaches and our licensed clinician can go into the home. So our behavior coaches have made home visits, have worked with parents with their child at home to try to carry over what's being done at school, and worked with parents on ways, to address behavior issues at home as well.
Well, if we had our own staff, they could do that as well.
Well, we can, and that is union issues. It's a position that we currently don't have. We'd have to create positions. They would be
I
all,
understand,
okay.
I understand, but
Right.
I do see the benefit of having our own as well, rather than contracting out if we find that our teachers are not happy.
yeah, we're definitely willing to come up
We'll
with.
definitely look at those costs for sure, because I think that from the number of people we have right now, it'd probably be cheaper with a contracted service though.
And that's
So we'll look at,
later
yeah,
on.
okay.
But we're looking for quality here.
Right.
We've had a program that has definitely been less than subpar in some of our minds. So that's why I'm asking us to be really critical
Mhm.
of some of these things. And if our teachers are unhappy with what they're getting, then just because it's cheaper, that's not okay.
Right.
Ms. Thompson, if you'd be able to follow up, just.
After my meeting tomorrow? Sure, absolutely. So what another audit recommendation was adjusting staff to levels dictated by students' IEPs. And obviously, you know, again, I talked about it previously, is we can't write IEPs based on, you know, what the build, and I think in the past it was what the building had to offer. So if it was just a resource room setting, that even if it didn't meet a student's needs, that's what we provided. And that's the reason for moving forward with the different continuum of services from your least restrictive environment, which is an inclusion setting, to a more restrictive environment, which is a self-contained classroom while keeping students in the district. So it's making sure that we have that continuum of services in every building and looking at our workload, caseload imbalance. And there are some imbalances within our buildings. And that's one of the things that I've worked on adjusting for this year. And as we move into the new building in 22, it'll be much easier to adjust those workload caseloads for the elementary building because everybody will be in one place. Curriculum. Again, there was concern about the lack of materials. And one of the things that we've done, I've worked with Dr. Martin this year, is with the training with our literacy collaborative framework, pushing that up through, you know, some of that training through the middle school, our BAS assessments, and we're going to provide some guided reading materials for our teachers in grades 6, 7, and 8. And we are continuing to look at math and reading and addressing, you know, how to meet the needs of our students using the materials that we have within our district and the programs that we're using within our district. Case manager assignments. One of was giving longer as opposed to shorter assignments of case managers. And at the elementary, that just seems to come natural. A lot of our intervention specialists stay with the students grades K through 2, and then they get a different intervention specialist in grades 3, 4, and then it would be 3, 4, 5 when we go back, you know, to 5th grade being in elementary. At the high school level, what happens is when students come in 9th grade, all the intervention specialists pretty much split the 9th grade team. And then, you know, there's one intervention specialist that specializes in math, one who specializes in language arts, and they stay with that student for grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 to build that relationship. One of the places it wasn't happening was in the middle school, and we are working on our middle school intervention specialists staying with their students for more than 1 year moving forward.
Right now, as I understand it, the case managers in the high school aren't necessarily the teachers.
They are co-teachers, you know, they don't have a lot of pull-out serve. There are some resource room settings, but there's not a lot. There's much more push into the classroom. So the intervention specialist, for example, would be with a student, just say in Algebra 1 and then Algebra 2, they would have the same intervention specialist along with the general education teacher.
So go back to the example that you talked about in the elementary school where the special needs teacher was in the classroom with the general. Mm-hmm. Is that what's going to happen now in the middle school?
Well, there's, again, your continuum of services. So there are times when the intervention specialist is in the classroom with the student. There are times when we have a resource room setting where they're pulling the student out to work specifically with that student. But so our 5th grade intervention specialists will be with our 6th grade team next year. You know,
So you're combining the 5th grade with the 6th, 7th, and 8th.
They're moving with their students. So they're staying with the same students, moving from, so 5th grade is moving to 6th grade next year, 6th grade is moving to 7th, 7th is moving to 8th, and 8th is coming down to 5th, and they'll start that rotation as well
And they'll stay with them throughout their duration.
at the middle school.
I can understand that for the severely needs kids. My niece has a severely autistic
Mhm.
child.
So you're talking about like a self-contained classroom.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the value of having special needs teachers stay with their kids. And my niece saw a lot of value
Mhm.
because her child is severely autistic. And, ultimately, after the years of having one teacher, the change was very traumatic, of course, but she really felt it helped him.
Mhm.
I'm not sure I see the value in having the much less special need kids, or which is our, pretty much all of our special needs, not all of them, but most of our special needs kids doing that same thing.
Well, I think it gives them a chance to build a relationship with a teacher that they can then trust, lean on, and someone who really knows them, that when they come to an IEP meeting, it's someone who can really talk about that student and say, I've seen the growth that this child has made over the last 2 or 3 years, versus someone coming in, spending the first, or any student who's identified, as a student with special needs is already behind the 8 ball. So we want a teacher that can pick up, right where they left off in June and hit the ground running, working with that student, and not have to have that wait time to get to know the student and know what, where the deficits are. They've built that relationship working with them from the previous year.
Again, I can see it for 1 or 2 years, but I think 4 years is really pushing it.
And the middle school would not be, after next year, it'll only be a 3-year.
I understand that.
Mhm.
I understand that. And that goes back to having each of the special needs teachers learning a whole new gen ed curriculum every year. I
And
don't know how difficult that is, because I'm not a teacher, but it would seem to me that the example that you used at the elementary school at Chippewa specifically, I can see it maybe working for a year or two, but getting into 3 and 4, you're learning an awful lot of gen ed along with the special needs over a fairly long period of years. And I don't know, I have no idea how long it takes to be able to coordinate with the gen ed teacher. I just don't know. But it just seems to me that's an awful lot of additional learning that each of the special needs teachers are going to have, as well as the gen ed teachers teaching, the same level, and having special needs kids come in at, that same level with their teacher. And then those kids and teacher changing every year. It just seems like an awful lot of work
Well,
for special needs teachers.
Fred, I would say that it is going to require some work. However, our special needs kids are usually the ones that need the most, and
I agree. I
building
absolutely
relationships with people. And we're not asking for 4 years. It's a 3-year. We do it at elementary school for 3 years. So they have the same intervention specialist for K1 and 2. So that's 3 years, and then 3, 4, 5. High school, it's 4 years. So we're not asking the middle school to do anything differently than other aspects of our organization are doing. In addition, 90% of our kids, they're working on specific goals, and they are using materials already that are, possibly 1 to 2 grade levels below, because they're trying to get that child up to that level to be able to meet that goal. So our intervention specialists are already learning, maybe 1 or 2 different curriculums other than the grade that they're currently teaching to help meet the goals and the needs of our students. So all we're doing is trying to say, when an intervention specialist writes the IEP at the end of the year, at the middle school, they're handing that IEP over to a teacher who has never seen that kid. So one teacher is writing the goals, but then the next teacher is supposed to implement the goals. What we're asking is the same teacher that's writing the goals, we want you to implement them. Since you wrote them based on their performance and their experience with them, where they are, continue with those services in their special education. We're trying to align the model to look like what we're doing currently at the elementary and the high school level.
So here's a question. There must be data to drive this that we show that this is effective methodology. I've seen 2-year looping. I personally did 5-year moving with gifted, but that, I had to learn, it took me 6 years to learn all the curriculums, but so what's our data? Where did we get this from? Where's this model from? Do a lot of people do it? Is it something?
And there are many other
educational
school
sound?
districts, and one of the things that,
Round
yes, I have a meeting on Friday with Brunswick. Brunswick does this model there. I actually just interviewed a teacher from Cleveland Metropolitan for ESY, who in the interview process talked about he's at the middle school level is doing it there. I also have a meeting set up with the pupil service director for Wycliffe schools because they're doing it there. So there are other local school districts around us that are doing this model.
High-performing schools?
So I don't know. I haven't looked at their report cards,
No, I'm just asking, you named, just not to be disrespectful, but there's usually on the benchmark schools, so I'm asking, like, what high-performing schools are using the same model? I mean, because that's where we want to go, because we felt like we've had subpar. So I'm asking you, is Hudson doing it? Solon doing it? Some of those
I can
other-
reach out to the,
I'm just asking, I'm not trying to be like confrontational as much as I need to be held up. We need to hold ourselves accountable here because of what's happened. Bay Village, Avon, some of these schools that, our parents brought us, examples of look what they're doing. Respectfully, I wouldn't consider Cleveland, although they were well ahead of us, but I wouldn't consider that as our benchmark for special ed. So, like I said, when we compare ourselves with our typical students, we use these schools as our benchmark. Shouldn't we do the same thing with special ed? I'm just asking the question.
and I can reach out to those school districts
I
to see
think-
what they're doing.
Fred, I mean, does that seem like a good idea before
Well,
we
yeah,
start moving
it seems like,
forward?
it
Let's
seems
see
like,
where-
yeah, it seems like a good idea. Again, my concern is the special needs teachers being able to keep up with the
And you've
gen
shared
ed
that.
classes year after year.
Right, but if she has this is the best practice, educational
Yeah,
practice.
and I've
Here's
always,
the schools doing it, then that feels a little bit maybe like sounder.
yeah, and I've always been, I tell everybody all the time that every decision I make here is what I believe is in the best interest of the kids, and I'm not going to stop. So
I just want to treat our special education the way we treat our other.
I agree. That's
Typical.
the whole
students.
reason why we did the
So
audit in the
I'd
first
like to
place.
hear that this is the best way of doing things. Thank you.
Back to our behavior coaches, they recommended hiring behavior specialists. And I already touched on this, that, we currently have 2 behavior coaches. Next year we'll have 3. We currently have 1 licensed clinician. Next year we'll have 2. And working with Lisa Malika, she works with our school counselors. We are working on better developing our social emotional curriculum at the high school. And one of the ways to do that is through Catholic Charities. They're going to be working with our school counselors on developing, working on the social emotional curriculum at the high school. There is one there, but we're possibly looking at a new curriculum for the high school. Our settlement agreements, again, after in the review, they talked about settlement agreements, due process, and the fiscal effect of, our school district with students with disabilities attending, being placed at other schools. This year we created an autism unit at the elementary level. We are working on opening an autism unit at the middle school for this coming school year, and we brought students back this year at our elementary level, continuing to bring our students back and meeting their needs. And if a need arises in another area besides autism, just say we have an overabundance of students being identified, just say with an emotional disturbance, and we have to look at a behavior unit, that would be something we would look at. And again, that goes into our continuum of services, that if we would do everything we can to keep our students in district versus placing them in other schools. So which leads us to our savings. The first thing is ESY. Last year for ESY, we had, if you look at the private service cost, it was $62,000. This year it's down to $13,000. And overall, just looking at what we spent last year, and again, this year is estimated, based on, we have all of our teachers have turned in their ESY paperwork for this year. We are trying to keep most of our students in-house and provide ESY through our Brecksville Broadview Heights School District. We're looking at a cost savings of about $40,000 for ESY for this summer. And then looking at how we've, in the past, what we spent last year for placing students out of district because we couldn't meet their needs with the continuum of services. We spent $1.2 million last year placing students out, and we are spending $776,000 this year, which is $461,000 savings to the district. So what's ahead for next year? You know, it's continuing to work on the relationship building and empowering the leadership within our district. There's going to be a focus next year on the RTI MTSS process, especially at the elementary school level, on how we provide interventions to students and in that regard. And then continuing addressing compliancy, some more professional development for all educational staff, including our aides, the creation of a special education newsletter. And I started working on the special education procedural handbook. That's a huge undertaking. And I've collected handbooks from other districts, looking through their handbooks to see what they had, but continuing to work on that to have a handbook that we can put on our website and give out to parents. And that's all I have.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you've done a lot in a short period of time. I mean, we thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
And I hope you don't feel like, I mean, we went through a full year
I
of
understand.
difficult conversations where it was upsetting to some of us on the board that it had gone on as long. So I can tell you personally, I really appreciate what you're doing. You're putting parameters in place and just asking us to, you know, treat this population the same as we treat all the
And
population.
I absolutely agree with
So
you.
I really appreciate that. I mean, getting materials was in the top 5 things. I'm hopeful. I mean, these teachers are working without materials, and that's where the lack of cohesiveness was at times. So I hope we do that as soon as possible. So, you know, we have something. And I know, you know, at least we're running a pilot or something where we're moving in that direction immediately.
Well, we've been doing some we've already started some training, you know, with some of our intervention specialists at the middle school level, you know, with the literacy collaborative framework, and we're going to continue to do that. We're actually meeting next Tuesday to talk about math, so and how to move forward with making sure that the teachers have the materials they need in the math department as well.
So hopefully next year.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have,
Any
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
My backside. So this kind of represents my first year here in technology in a pandemic. Like
I should have started that way too.
a year of terror. So I'm going to go right through the network audit that that was done prior to my tenure here, and the bullet points will really follow their concerns, their key themes, and I will update you on what action we've taken on those in light of time. They did have some low risk items that I left off, but the high and medium risk stuff I will cover in this presentation. So the first thing they had is that essentially we're understaffed. The top part, IT operations, need to be proactive in line with the district's business needs. Their biggest indication in that audit was that you need more people to align that. I disagree. Our current staff is 4 technology staff, and I will point out that for a few months we were 3, plus contracted services. We hired an additional staff member in maybe November, and our total salary and expenditures for contracted services less than $350,000. I think when Mr. Yandglass saw this, he panicked because he thought I was going to ask for more people. This is just to set context, and this was what they had in the audit. So this is what we're doing. Exposure relating to business continuity. Our need to test was hindered. This is the first time I've actually seen any of you in person. We've all been little squares together before, but our old server infrastructure was we couldn't replicate it. it was old and specifically written for this school and not using off-the-shelf software and parts, really. So to replicate it to test a failure was impossible or nearly impossible. That is the challenges related to testing the previous server environment. We are right at the end of implementing the largest portion of our server environment upgrade, which is not really, we didn't buy anything. What we're doing is implementing really the practices that have been implemented for the last 15 years in our industry and all industries, not just educational technology. With that large portion done, we will now have a replicable, repeatable network and server infrastructure that we can then do these fail tests with. So that the complete server upgrade will still take us a year or two to complete, but the large portion of it will be complete this summer. We're actually, Paul and I were talking on Tuesday, and I didn't know Paul's here, but he acts as a good foil. I can point to him and say, we did this. We were talking on Tuesday, we had teachers who wanted to keep their laptops for the summer, so we've already put them onto the new, before they've left, we put them on the new network on our Active Directory servers. And so far, so good, we've not had any problems. Lack of details regarding new elementary school technology. I think when this audit was done, that wasn't really accurate. We did have details in the specifications and bid process. I think what was really missing was it tying it to what we have now. It was somewhat generically written and not in mind with what we're doing in our other buildings, for instance. Not necessarily having the same interactive boards as we have in our other classrooms. And that's a problem because we want to build some institutional knowledge in the tools that we use so that our teachers can share best practices and their successes or their failures, so that people like Scott Kinkoff and Dr. Martin can teach with one set of tools. Everybody's driving the same car. So since then, we have reviewed everything from the network to classroom technology. The network specifications equipment have been identified, and I'll get to it later. That equipment, that network is designed, the equipment is specified. We're going to use E-rate funds to buy it. And I'll get to that a little later. The classroom technology specifications, Chris and I met with the construction team on Tuesday or Wednesday this week to go through those. I think we only have one or two items that we're going to review the equipment that was purchased. And I could talk more about that, but if you want to know more about it, I'll tell you more about it later. But because of time, I'll get over the specifics what we covered. So there are high-level risks. These were identified by the company. Migration to Windows 10, that is complete. I think probably we'll still track down one or two Windows 7 machines, but it is complete. Redundancy at district gateways. There's a couple of items there. As you know, I work with a number of districts. None of them have redundant connectivity. It's expensive, and it's not much use 99.99% of the time. It is something we could do. It's actually the easiest thing to do, as long as you can pay for it. We have implemented in this E-rate project we're doing this summer, we will have hardware redundancy in place, and we have replaced our firewall. That was one of the items that was listed in there. Our old firewall did not have the throughput necessary, and it was not to modern standards. The firewall we've done here is part of our contract with Connect, our ISP, includes firewall service. So we've taken advantage of that. That's not to say that we will stick with that in the future, but it was a way for us to move immediately and without cost to protect ourselves, provide more throughput. The network is very complex. So if the network works great, but there is a bottleneck at that firewall, everybody thinks the network's no good. So we need to make sure that all of our pathways are open. So this was one way we could do it, just for the labor that was involved in that we worked on in implementing that firewall. We may find in the future that we would prefer to manage our own firewall. There are, with the security threats that we're all aware of, if you watch the news these days, we may choose to do our own firewall. We would do that as part of an E-rate project, and we would manage it. But for now, we've improved our capacity. no cost to us, and it has improved. It was one of the key sticking points on our network. Network monitoring and management. This is really an odd one. We had the tools and we had the people to do it. I actually didn't know Paul was going to be here, but Paul's a perfectly qualified network administrator. He just wasn't turned loose to do that job. So that's what Paul does. And if he needs help, we have in our contracted services, we have our own network engineer from my team. We meet once a week to go over everything from projects to network tools. This was just a matter of saying, go do your job and we'll get out of the way. Wireless network design improvement, that's a big thing here, and it is 100% true that it is subpar here. I think that was a term that you used, especially it was subpar. We did implement several changes to the network equipment that we had at the beginning of the school year to improve it. We, from our metrics, saw an improvement. We believe our end users saw an improvement. It's not where we want it to be. This summer, we actually had the kickoff meeting today for the project that will include the high school, middle school, and this building for all new wireless controller access points. They will be 2 generations newer than what we have now. And we were able, so we're using E-rate funds and Ohio Connectivity Grant funds. If you don't know what the Ohio Broadband Connectivity Grant is, it was a grant that the state of Ohio threw together at the last minute in October to improve access for students who didn't have Wi-Fi at home. Largely, schools used it for hotspots, which we did too. We rented lots of hotspots for students for a year, but it also allowed us to buy hardware to provide access to students outside of our buildings, which means we could provide it to cover parking lots, common areas. So we've used it to blanket our campuses in Wi-Fi. And that was 100% cost reimbursement. So it was at no cost to us. In that project, we included the new controller for our access points. So you have to buy this big brain to control your access points. We bought that on the Ohio Connectivity Grant instead of E-rate. Our E-rate reimbursement is 40%. Our Ohio Connectivity Grant was 100%. So we bought the controller for free.
So has the Wi-Fi improved up at the high school? Have you heard, do you have feedback?
So our feedback is that it's certainly been better. It will be much, much better next year. We knew that we were not going to make it perfect. It's 2 generations behind. Its design, in my opinion, there's a million ways to skin a cat, but in my opinion, the design was flawed. I think Paul would agree with that. Our team agreed that the design originally was flawed. It didn't make the best use of it. We've made the changes that we thought would give us the biggest bang for the buck in a short period of time. It has improved this year, but it's not just the wireless network. Like I spoke before, if we did a whole network upgrade and we left the old firewall in place, people would still think the wireless was bad. So it's a whole system that has to go together. So it has improved by our metrics and by our feedback, but we still have room to go.
And Paul, or you have online visibility into the network sort of at all times and get those alerts
So
if and when there are issues?
For the switching, yes, we will add that and for our external access points, we bought the connectivity grant.
Okay.
Those are part of that. When we are complete with our project, we'll be on one platform and what they like to call in the technology world, single pane of glass.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see our whole network from internet connection to end user in one place. And that place provides us real-time alerts.
Okay.
It provides us some probably more machine learning than artificial intelligence, although the marketing people will tell you it's some AI that helps heal issues before we get to it. But it is the best we could buy now. Formal backup and recovery procedure. This really goes along with our disaster recovery previously in our business continuity. When you have a one-off system built by a single person that doesn't match anything in the world, it's very difficult to back up. We did have a backup system in place. Our backup system is better now and continues to be improved. As we bring on these servers online, we will go to a more traditional or formal, but backup is now part of security. It used to be backup was just part of a computer dying and you needed to get that data. Backup is now part of a security plan. So that will continue to evolve. I don't know that we will ever get to the end zone with backup. We will continue to have to improve what we do for backup.
Are the servers currently on premise or off premise for the ones that have moved?
So we're still on premise.
Okay.
we have a relatively new virtual environment here, and we've just leveraged that to what we would call spin up to activate new virtual machines. I am a fan of getting out of the business of hosting our own servers in this day and age, but we have a significant investment that was made prior to me being here in that environment. We have qualified people to manage it. We have licenses that are paid for and the hardware that's paid for. So we'll continue to leverage it until it reaches the end of life, at which point we'll probably have a discussion about entering into contracts with hosting. Business continuity planning is essentially the same as formal backups. It adds in the portion of what is mission critical with all of our departments, whether it's transportation or finance or curriculum. And that'll be a much bigger project. Business continuity is much bigger than just technology.
Is there an educational standard for business continuity planning?
There is not. That's a great question. I've never had that question asked before. There is not. So we have implemented our own in other districts, and we'll use that as a framework here, but it won't be the same everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
District credentials on the dark web, we continue to scan that. That is something that happens with, typically what it is a student who has been gone for years, their username and password shows up somewhere, that account has long been activated, but we have to keep up on that because we never know when legitimate credentials are going to be leaked or somebody's password's too easy or easy to guess. I don't want this to get into this at the moment. It's in medium level risk, but the school district, as all school districts, will soon have a very serious conversation about cybersecurity. We've had conversations about it. It's got to the point now where, and this is not for this district as yet, but insurance carriers won't carry you unless you have implemented multi-factor authentication, which will hugely impact the way our teachers interact with their computers and student information. It is the easiest part will be implementing it from a technology standpoint. It'll be a completely new procedure. And it's unfortunate. We will have no choice. We won't be able to get cyber insurance in a year or two without it.
It's big. It's
creating
coming.
formal policies and procedures, that, as it says in the bottom. So additional contracted services, so that's me and my team. We provide redundancy. If Paul gets hit by a bus tomorrow, we have a network engineer.
Wins the lottery. Wins the lottery.
Yes. No, I would think he'd still answer the phone if you won the lottery.
As long as it's not one of our buses.
Right. So we still have a network engineer on staff. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I should start with that one, Paul. I get hit by a bus tomorrow and it's not one of ours. Paul steps in and goes to cabinet meetings and he gets to do these things that you hope he's going to be walking me across the driveway now. No buses. And then formal procedures are, they're in a constant development. As we take on new technologies, we're looking at perhaps making a change with our security cameras. The deployment of those cameras is completely different than what we've been doing. And that's just a small portion of it. This whole new Active Directory environment we've put in, the deployment for those PCs is completely different than what we've been doing, and much easier, thankfully. So the procedures are evolving. Address physical risks and exposure in server and network rooms. We've been working with Chris on, there are some environmental risks where we don't have air conditioning. I shouldn't say we don't have air conditioning. Perhaps it is not sufficient in those areas because we've added more technology. We are working on adding generator backup to specific closets that are critical. It'll be a project. I mean, it is not cheap to add power backup to those rooms. Conduct regular vulnerability testing. We do network audits are performed on regular schedule to identify vulnerabilities. Both we do that and Connect does that. And then the firewalls we spoke about is now, instead of just monitored by us with our own, it's monitored by Paul's team, our team, and actually Connect as well. Yes, so there are really three. So, and that's the audit. I can answer any questions, and then I got just a couple of slides on what we've been doing aside from the audit. We recovered nearly $60,000 in additional money that's related to a previous E-rate project that it was going to expire in September. We weren't going to get that money. we did recover it and that those checks have been cashed. We use E-rate funds to purchase 185,000, I think it's 187, but more than $185,000 in network equipment for a new elementary building. I don't know how it got to that, but we weren't going to. We were literally the last week or two before the closing of the window, and had been no conversation with that. We're using E-rate funds to purchase more than $335,000 worth of network equipment and cabling for our existing buildings, and we use the Ohio Broadband Connectivity Grant funds to purchase more than $65,000 in external wireless access points, and that's 100% reimbursement, so we don't pay anything for that. And these are the things we've been keeping ourselves busy with in a pandemic. Since August 1st, we configured and deployed 350 laptops to teachers for mobile instruction. We did 600 Chromebooks for our primary grades, 200 wireless microphones and cameras and tripods, what we called our mobile teaching studios. And we've been busy with the Active Directory environment, which is our whole server upgrade. So that has been ongoing since August or July, maybe, with Active Directory. That's it. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to see all of you in person. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for your efforts. This is Herculean and long overdue.
It's not alone. If Paul had his whole team here for me to point to, I would have.
Yeah.
It's certainly not alone. I just get to be the guy to talk.
So one question on, with a lot of the recent stories in the news about ransomware,
Yes,
how are we situated for a ransomware attack?
well, we would have to talk about specific vectors, which I don't think we want to talk about in this forum, but ironically, our move right now from old to new puts us in a pretty good spot because we have two systems operating in parallel. So it's actually not a bad place. It's not sustainable, but it's not a bad place. We also do have, we've been improving our backup systems. We are, as part of this, we're migrating all of our files to Google Drive, which is a much more secure platform as far as the Google Vault allows us to snapshot what is in everybody's Google Drive at a given time, so we can recover from there as well. So we're in a good place, but we'll never be in a safe place. We live in a bad neighborhood these days. The cyber world is not a fun place to be.
The other question was, you mentioned
You
that.
said one question. I'll give you the second one for free.
I did. I meant one at a time.
One. Well, this one's false. This one's false.
From a timeline standpoint, when do you think that we would kind of leverage out our investment in our current on-prem hardware and look to migrate to a hosting environment?
I think what we'll see is we probably have 2 more years of where we don't need to do anything. I would say at 2 years, if we're bringing on resource-intensive applications that we might add, those will, at that point, we will start with those being hosted, and then either sunset applications. There are things that we won't any longer use or migrate. I'd say 2 years for sure. Our hardware is more than sufficient. After that, they'll get a little dicier. And you never know if you know about technology. Some of you do. You never know when the killer app is going to come up. It's resource intensive, and suddenly we need new equipment. But that's where I'm pretty comfortable with. I don't think we'll do that for anything there.
Are you able to share how many servers we currently have in the district?
So more than 50.
Physical or virtual?
We're not.
Because physically we have about a dozen.
Okay.
But virtually
we probably have about 40.
Yeah. Okay.
So virtual or physical, really the upkeep on a server is not the hardware. The upkeep on the server is patching, access, and keeping it up, but it's not the hardware.
Yeah.
So if our staff has technology issues, do we have a help desk in place where?
Yep, and they've been submitting
tickets and.
Absolutely.
So we've had good response time getting the best that we can.
So actually, I feel like we're doing very well with that, considering we're really, if you think about it, we're supporting 2 schools throughout the year. We're supporting virtual academy and in person. And that in-person academy had far more technology than we ever had, with microphones and cameras, and we added a computer to every classroom. So it was far better than I expected. Our response times are time to resolution. So response time is just how fast do I get there and say I'll work on it. resolution time is really what we're after, and it's outstanding. Now, I won't, there are times when we'll check a projector and the bulb is burned out and we screwed up and didn't order inventory for it, and it takes a few days, we have to put a temporary one in there, get a PO and get new projector bulbs. But when you don't count those, we're waiting for parts, a power supply for a bad computer. The majority, nearly 75%, are resolved within the same day. So,
That's huge.
and that doesn't count repairing Chromebooks as part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring him in for our regular meeting.
All right, I'm gonna just put my mask on.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
I'm just being, yeah, I'm just being weird. Oh my gosh.
Come on in.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you guys, we don't know the part.
Okay. Item 5, President's announcements. Make it short and sweet. I really thoroughly enjoyed going to the senior award night last week. I got to do 2 different hats. As a council president, I got to sit up with all the other dignitaries, so to speak, and also as a member of Brecksville Kiwanis, I got to pass out 10 scholarships. The Kiwanis awarded, and then I also got to pass out the award. The Brecksville Kiwanis sponsor the Outstanding Senior Male of the Year. So I got to pass out that award to Luke Kieran. And I really was energized, like I always am, being able to get around some of our students. So it was a good experience for me, and hopefully it was a good experience for all of our seniors that won awards and scholarships. I just was in awe of some of the students and their accomplishments. So anyway, that's all the announcement that I have. Item 6, student recognitions.
Yes, so we have a couple students we'd like to recognize this evening. I'm going to let their wonderful German teacher talk about what they actually did and how they won the award before I actually present them.
Okay, well, thank you. So yeah, tonight we'd like to congratulate Benjamin Brooks, Faith Hutchinson, Isabella Brashear for scoring so well on the National German exam. And we give this exam every year. This year was a little bit special because we were so many obstacles. And in spite of being home for a good part of the year, these 3 were able to score in the top 10% of test takers in the state of Ohio, which is something that's really amazing. I'm really proud of them to overcome all those challenges. So let's congratulate them.
Okay, Benjamin.
All right.
Very good, thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Sorry we made you wait for a little bit. But yeah, and you guys are welcome to stay, but you don't have to stay either. That's completely up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 7, board member committee assignments. And I don't believe Mr. Gilbride is here.
Yes, he is here.
Oh, there he is, Mr. Gilbride. Good to see you.
Pleasure to see you, sir.
Let's see, Mr. Dosen is City of Broadview Heights Tax Incentive. What is this?
Are you on item 7?
Yes. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Financial Liaison Audit Committee, the report.
No updates.
No.
Hang on, bear with me for a second.
Up on the screen too.
Oh, thank you. Permanent Improvement Committee, Ellen and Mark.
No updates other than there's going to be a lot going on at the high school and the middle school this summer.
Except for our last meeting. there was a
Yeah.
lot going on.
Yeah, and some of that work will be starting soon, so.
Board Policy Committee, myself and Kathleen, and we'll have our turn later on in the meeting with the second reading and approval of our new policies. Sustainability Committee, Ellen.
We are going to have an update next month, but nothing today.
Okay. Next. District Committee Reports, Transportation Appeals Committee, Mark.
No appeals.
Cuyahoga Valley Career Center Report, Mr. Gilbride.
Good evening, all. Pleasure to see you all. Nice to get out in person again. Just a couple of quick things. Number one, on a personal note, our own Gina March resigned recently from her post as business liaison. She will be replaced. We wish her well. Secondly, we have the teachers union has approved a new contract. The board will be looking at voting on that tomorrow evening. From what I understand, it has a significant positive impact on our 5-year plan. And lastly, the 5-year plan, I can tell you from what I've seen, puts us in the black for all 5 years. So we finished up the calendar year just fine and headed into next year on a good note. So all is well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great news.
Yes.
How's our adult education going? 'Cause
Still, Kathleen.
Yeah.
The nursing situation this past year did not have the attendance that's really required. We saw significant grants due to COVID that have really put that organization on solid footing, but there still needs work to be done to add second and third key program offerings that will support that long term. There's a couple of ideas in the works. Hopefully we'll have something to report by fall on what that second or third offering will look like. That can be a significant pillar for adult education.
Okay, thank you.
One last question, I'm sorry. Mr. Gilbride, I know you, last year you reported that the school was working on rectifying or remedying some of their retention issues and attrition issues. Has there been any, and I know COVID was a very, very unique year to embark on that journey. Has there been any progress made on that front?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't really address that.
Okay,
Let me take a look at that. I'll get you an update.
very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbride. Safety and Security Meeting. We haven't had any in the last month, so I don't think there's a report. Schools Foundation report, Whitney,
Nothing at this time.
and PSO report. We had our last PSO council meeting the first week of this month, and we're done now until the end of summer.
So I saw the PSO had a question and answer between Mrs. Monteleone
Yes.
Mrs. Magyar. I sent that. I think the only one who wouldn't get that is Mr. Dozen maybe, so I sent it to him.
Okay.
But that was a unique thing that they did to try and,
Yes, I
you
haven't
know,
even had a chance to read it yet, so
okay.
I'm not gonna comment on it.
Yeah. I thought it was informative and it was helpful to the community.
Okay, item number 10. Oh, wait a minute, item number 9, superintendent's announcements.
Just want to remind everyone that we have graduation on Saturday. Very excited. It's at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. I think the kids are pretty excited. It will start with our senior parade, which I think is now going to become a tradition after last year that we're going to be doing a parade every year. Our parade this year is going to the kids are actually going to pull into the new entryway of the new elementary school and snake through the Blossom property for it to start there and follow the same path that it did last year to end up here at the high school. We will then load our seniors onto buses where parents can then follow their kids down to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse and bus our students down there for a ceremony starting at 3 o'clock. I had the wonderful pleasure of attending prom this year that was held on May 15th. It was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it was set outside, and it was absolutely a beautiful event. So just a great venue for the kids. I think they all enjoyed it, and they all looked amazing. And last week, over a period of 3 days, we took our third graders, our current third graders, who are going to be the first fifth grade class out at our new elementary school, out to the new elementary school. They got to tour the building and went through a ceremonial brick laying. So they each got to lay a brick on the new building. And then we gave them a little foam brick that has their class and the logo on it for them to take home. And some of the kids, as I stood out by the bus, as they were getting back on the bus, they said to me, "Miss Magyar, I can't believe I'm actually going to say this, but I'm looking forward to coming to school." So that was very cute. I don't know who was more excited, the kids or the teachers. They were extremely impressed with the building. Over the summer and into next year, we will be taking different groups of constituents and you, of course, on a tour of the building once it's enclosed, so you can kind of start to see how some of the spaces are coming together. One group that we're starting with particularly tomorrow is we are taking all of our PSO presidents, past and the new ones for next year, on a tour of the building starting tomorrow. So they're very excited. So while they had one last meeting, they scheduled one more, Fred, just the presidents, so that they could come see the building. So I'm excited to take them on that tour tomorrow.
So my report was incorrect.
Well, kind of.
Is the PSO going to be doing an update to us, a report like they do yearly, where they tell what they've done? Is it?
We can invite them. Yes, we can invite them to the June 26th meeting. I think typically we had it.
We would have
had it in May.
It would have been now, yeah.
I just would like to hear, at least see a report.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll invite them to the June meeting. Okay, item number 10, treasurer's announcements.
The only thing I have to report is that they just released this week 60% of our ESSER 3 funds in allocation. So we're working on getting that submitted for approval. So we should be doing that next. So so far for us, it's 1.4 million out of the roughly 2.1 million that was allocated. So that's been available, and we'll get the plan submitted as soon as possible. That's it.
Okay, community communications. Hearing of the public, persons wishing to address the Board of Education may do so at this point. No formal action will be taken on subjects that are not included on this agenda until the board has had an opportunity to study them. Comments regarding personnel must be submitted in writing through the office of the superintendent. In order for the board to complete the planned agenda in an effective and efficient manner, and to provide sufficient opportunities for members of the public to be heard. Hearing of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes, during which each speaker shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Is there anyone here who would like to speak?
There's a microphone right up there.
I just hold it where I sit.
Sure.
Forgive me, I don't public speak often. My name is Megan Bender. I have a child in kindergarten with 3 siblings to follow her in the next few years. We love our community, and we're so excited for our children to become official Bs. I was relieved and proud of our board last year when we decided to return to hybrid in-person learning, despite the recommendation of the health department to go all virtual. I want to firstly commend the board. You've had to make some very tough, unusual decisions this year. We have such a vibrant and special community, and there's a reason why our schools are held to such a high prestige and why families move here to send their children through the district. As parents and teachers, we should be encouraging our children to use logical reasoning and critical thinking. Now that we know better, we need to do better. We know that school children are at a significantly lower risk at catching COVID-19. We know that they are not known to significantly spread the coronavirus. And if they do get sick, as my children did, they are at a low risk of severe illness. There is a 99.997% survival rate. This statement doesn't in any way diminish the lives lost to the pandemic, but it is a fact. Among children, there have been 3.94 million reported cases, 316 deaths reported as of May 20th, according to AAP data. I printed out the report regarding children in COVID-19, demonstrating their very low risk. For time's sake, I will not read it out loud, but we'll give it to you for your review. We are teaching our children to be fearful of their bodies, that they may spread the germs, to be fearful of their peers, teachers, and family, that they may catch the coronavirus from them. Face masks impair facial recognition and identification. My daughter told me a few weeks ago, she says, "Mom, I haven't seen the faces of 2 of my teachers." This was in May, the last month of the school year. She would be unable to recognize 2 of her teachers without a mask on. My daughter also receives speech services. While during session, they have to wear face shields. Throughout the remainder of the week, she is unable to see the formation of sounds from her teacher to further work on and improve upon her speech. Face masks impair verbal and nonverbal communication. They block emotional signaling between the teacher and the student and the peers to each other. How can we expect our children to become socially and emotionally intelligent when we are covering more than half of their faces, as well as their peers and teachers, all while demanding that they stay 6 feet away from everyone? Face masks are also known to have an increase of reported headaches, lower oxygen level, dermatitis, and have been shown to worsen the person's illness because they are breathing back their viral load. This past spring, every teacher that wished to get vaccinated was able to get vaccinated. The CDC now states that these were effective, and a vaccinated person does not need to quarantine if they have been exposed to COVID-19, nor do they need to wear a mask in most circumstances. With adults across the country being able to receive the vaccine, combined with the known fact that children are at an extremely low risk, who are we protecting by continuing to mask our children? I fear that in trying to protect our children from getting sick, we have created an abundance of other problems and issues for them. There are many facts and resources to support what I'm asking you to do tonight, which is to unmask our children. I have provided some, but this is by no means inclusive. To highlight a few, the World Health Organization admits that there is an absence of strong scientific evidence, and they have very limited data on masking children. Some may say that there are only 4 days of school left. Is it really going to do anything? I say yes. Let our kindergartners see their teachers. Let our seniors see their classmates for their final days, as well as all the students in between. Let the teachers see their students smile, a smile of accomplishment for having mastered a new concept, for reading, the joy of field day. Let us show our children that we have their best interests at heart and are willing to do whatever we can for them. Let us finish the year on a high note. I had to send my daughter to school yesterday wearing a mask while it was 90 degrees outside with an air quality alert. As we all know, the elementary schools do not have air conditioning. I challenge you that if your answer is no, then to pick a day with similar weather, go to one of the elementary schools and stay the whole day with the children, wearing your mask the entire time that they are required to do so. I can speak from personal experience. I was in the preschool at Stepping Stones, which is also not air conditioned, for 20 minutes without a mask and struggled. As a parent, I am my child's advocate, protector, and teacher, among many more things. I am here tonight to advocate for my children and to teach them to speak up when I believe something is not right. As parents, we should have the choice of whether or not to mask our children. Please return that decision back to the parents. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Thank you for speaking up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Very important for our public to speak up. Thank you.
Okay, item number 12, other board business. Board policy revisions, second reading. Is there any comments on our policies?
You need a motion?
Oh, sorry, I need a motion.
So moved.
Second? Okay, is there any discussion on our policies? We had a couple of items that we brought up last meeting, but this is the second reading, and if there's no other discussion, then roll call.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Item 12. I'm sorry, item 13. Superintendent's other business. And I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I guess I should have read everything. University of Akron MOU, Kent State University MOU, Moraine Community College MOU, D Tri-C MOU, C OHSAA resolution, I'm sorry, that was E. F Craven Hearing and Speech Contract, G Suburban Transport Contract, H 2021 BBHCSD graduates, I STEPS contract, and J approval of superintendent's other business. Is there any discussion on any of these?
Just a question, do we have an MOU with Cleveland State
We did
for
not,
College Credit Plus?
we have not received one as of this date. These are the ones that we've received. We typically do them all in one bunch, but we have not gotten one from Cleveland
Generally,
State.
do we have one?
We do, we call, they haven't given us.
Okay.
Sometimes it's really late.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. We have-
So our students can't, I mean, our students are already setting their schedules.
Yeah, so that's the problem. Sometimes they.
Okay,
really late.
wow,
We just called again this week because they weren't on.
okay.
I had a
Just because some of these ones don't transfer well to, the higher level colleges. That's why I'm asking. I know Cleveland State does. Okay.
What does STEPS Educational Group do?
They work with kids who have been identified with some special needs, more intense and special needs.
Okay.
And there's nothing new here, right? These are all
No.
contracts that this is an annual process.
Yep.
The only thing new is the class of 2021 graduates.
Yeah, let's hope there's no repeats.
Well, just congratulations to the class of 2021. All right, a roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Superintendent's consent agenda, certified recommendations, classified recommendations, approval of superintendent's consent agenda. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I will have comments after your vote.
Just a question again on the continuing contracts that we're offering. Could you just refresh the board on what process we go through as an organization to ensure that, because when we go to continuing, that's,
Mhm.
a firmer commitment for a long-term.
Sure.
employment.
So when a teacher is eligible for a continuing contract, which is after 7 years, they go to their building administrator and ask to be considered for a continuing contract. The administrator puts them on an evaluation cycle that entails 3 observations in the full evaluation cycle. And then that recommendation is made as to whether or not, based on those evaluations and based on past experience, as to whether or not we want to make that recommendation for a continuing contract.
And this past year, with so much of it being remote, did that influence any of our decision-making? I mean, it was kind of such an odd year.
I have not asked
From
our
an
building.
Yeah, I mean, from an evaluation standpoint, I don't know how easy it was to evaluate based
Oh, it
on.
wasn't easy. It certainly wasn't easy, but, our administrators did their due diligence and were able to do some, at the beginning of the year if they weren't here. But because we were in a hybrid, for the start of the year, the teachers were on campus to be able to do some of those evaluations as needed, as required by Ohio Revised Code. And we were only in a remote situation for 5 weeks. So those teachers who had to have an evaluation done, or an observation done, during that period of time, if it was necessary to meet a deadline, did work with their building principal to maybe do that specific observation remotely if need be.
Are there people who expected to get a continuing contract that did not receive one? And do we have conversations with those people, or do they simply not find their name on the list?
Our head principals do a really good job setting it up to begin with. And if they feel that there's a possibility they won't get it, they tell them in advance before they waive their contract.
So it just doesn't just happen.
Yeah,
Okay.
so a lot of times they'll say, from what I observed last year and what I've seen over the last couple of years, if you go for for this continuing contract, there's a real strong possibility I may not recommend you for continuing contract. And they've since waived their contract, so then they kind of hold off and they say, well, what can I do to improve, and then go another year and work towards that way. Our principals do have those conversations with them, and that's why the recommendation letters always come from the head principals, and the observations are from the head principal, because they want to make sure that they're the ones that are recommending it. They're the ones that are signing off on it.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Any other discussion?
I'd just like to congratulate Mr. Marlowe on his retirement. He was my 6th grade teacher. So I did fail him, however, in that he did request that one of my classmates go into civil engineering and create a road made out of bubble gum, because inevitably bubble gum was everywhere on the roads and sidewalks, and so we figured, why not build a road out of bubble gum? So did not meet that expectation, but congratulations nonetheless to all of our teachers and staff retiring.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
I would like to now formally introduce you to Tina McCauley. She is going to be our new principal at Chippewa Elementary School next year and be one of our principals that will be going to the new elementary school. She comes to us from Shaker Heights City Schools. I don't know if you want to say a couple words.
Sure. I'm really excited to join the staff here at Broadview Heights. Colleen's been very welcoming, and I'm excited to see what I can do, and I'm glad that I got to meet you tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
You've already know his familiar face, but we wanted to formally introduce him as the new high school principal at Broadview Heights High School. Kevin will be starting in that role a couple extended days in early July, but we'll do a nice transition with Mr. Ost, who is leaving to go in to be a central office administrator in another district. So Kevin, if you'd like to say and introduce your beautiful family that you brought with you.
Sure. We're going to start with the one who's not here. My son Kyle, he had a soccer game against the team a little bit for the less of us that wears purple, so I'm not going to say that. They won. I have my daughter Madeline here. She'll be going into the 6th grade, starting middle school next year, where my wife teaches at, teaching 7th and 8th grade STEM classes called Project Lead the Way. So kind of a family of educators, which is very helpful at home, and she always reminds me exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm deeply humbled and honored to have this opportunity to serve the communities of Brexville and Broadview Heights. We have a very special staff at the high school, district-wide, you'll come to find out, Tina, and they're outstanding educators and have created great opportunities for an outstanding group of kids. So I'm just very excited to bring some energy and excitement, and to be very approachable and available to all community members, teachers, and most importantly, our kids. And I'm very forward to August 1st when we can hit the ground running. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm deeply honored.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard. Okay, item number 15, treasurer's consent agenda.
We always save the best for last, right? You'll need a motion
See, now
now.
you can't leave. Now they can't leave now.
Trust me.
When we were talking about the board meeting on the new building, it lasted a little bit. They were a little bit younger. They had to go. Stranded.
Item A is financial report. Item B, donations. Item C, May 2021 5-year forecast update. Item D, administrative salary schedule. Item E, student fees for 2021-2022. Item F, minutes. Item G, approval of treasurer's consent agenda. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Craig?
Okay, so in lieu of, here's our monthly report that I usually share with you guys. It almost looks the same as last month, which is great news for us as we have just 2 months left in our fiscal year. So here's where we look at the end of the year right now, which is at $75,000 to the positive. We're hoping again, with COVID-19, if we can just stay where we are, that's a good move for us. So we've gotten some, I'll talk more about in the forecast of where we're at with revenues and expenditures. This is that comparison of monthly revenue from last year to this year. So this is a tax of when the taxes kind of came in April. It's a little bit later than the prior year. Again, we've seen that delay throughout with revenues. This compares from year to year. Our revenues are up overall by 1.1 million. And then on the revenue side, in total, $821,000 to the positive, again, reminding that a lot of that is from that state revenue that's been restored. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in the forecast update. On the expenditure side, I've said it before as well, I've been maintaining our expenditures well throughout this pandemic. We've been really utilizing our federal funds to the best of their abilities. And so you see a lot of consistency here. It is still higher than the previous year, which is normal because of some salaries and benefits that are there. And then overall, we are still in the black projected currently. Okay. I will let Ms. Magyar, did you say you wanted to talk about the donations? We have 2 donations on.
Yes, I just wanted to thank the Julian family for donating $500 to the class of 2021, our graduating class, and then talk a little bit about Tracy and Gordon Gibb, who reached out. They unfortunately lost an infant child years back and had, in memory of their infant child, had donated a buddy bench to one of our elementary schools in years past and reached out and wanted to do the same for the new elementary school. So we got a price for the buddy, for what the benches are that we had as part of our design. They dropped off a donation and they're going to come up with what they want, a plaque to say, and we're going to put that plaque on the bench at the new elementary school. So I just wanted to say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. I think that's a wonderful gesture and a way to memorialize their child that they lost. And we really appreciate the donation.
Well, thank you.
I truly will save the best for last, the 5-year forecast. The administrative salary schedule just has 2 changes, which we have bolded for you. One is the addition, which is the same salary index, is the addition of the custodial maintenance supervisor to keep that in line with food service and transportation. And then this number of days has been revised from 230 to 228. And the reasoning behind that is just the way that the 260 contract is minus holidays. It didn't make any sense for that to be 230, and that is 228 with holidays and vacation days factored in. The student fees for next year are identical. I do want to point out that from some feedback this year, we have agreed to add a new reduced CCP fee because we do have some students that are primarily attending so many classes out of district. However, there are still a lot of programs that they benefit from. So we did include that for next year for our high school students that are attending CCP courses, that it is an additional, they would take that fee instead of the general fee of $70. So everything else has been the same for any of the student fees for next year. We'll have our pay to participate on for June. And now I will get into the forecast update.
Thank you for looking into it. I know that we had some feedback, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Student fees.
So I will keep this brief because there are not a lot of changes that we really have to look at. So this is just the update. Again, this is where we come from. This is from November, basically, and what's changed since then and how we're projecting forward. This is just the general disclaimers about what a forecast is. Again, we're shooting in the dark sometimes, especially in COVID-19, but these are some of the assumptions that we take under consideration. So this is one of the general, let me move this out of the way real quick. This is our keep it simple statement, which compares to the top section there is where we were in November. And then the bigger section is where we are currently. So we draw our attention to 2025. Yes, we do see a positive $3 million, which is great news for us. Now, again, I'll go into those details as to why here shortly. However, what concerns us, or what should be still concerning, is we've made progress in line 6.010, which is our revenue surplus and deficit. But we would be projected to deficit spend over the next 4 years. So again, we'll be monitoring that closely, but it is less. So I feel like we've made some definite progress. And again, I'll talk about those here in a minute, but that is what accompanies, or what kind of makes us to the positive more so, even though we're still in a positive of $12 million. It's starting to be at that threshold where we've got to be very diligent moving forward in our district and the size we are, because $12 million sounds like a lot of money, but in a district like this, when payroll is $2 million every 2 weeks, it's really not as much as it may sound. Okay, so what's been updated with revenues, as I've said before, our unrestricted aid. We've received some of that money back, but we're still at a decreased level. But the General Assembly and the Governor's Office have indicated that we should at least resume back to our fiscal 19 funding levels for next year. So that was still out in November. We weren't sure where that was going to be. So that was a significant amount of money that has now been factored into the forecast, which accounts for the increases in revenue. On the real estate side, we had earlier estimates were lower due to the current conditions. Since last fall, indications are that there will be more growth in terms of real estate. While this is somewhat an increase, the amount is still conservative. And working with our consultant at Forecast Analytics, we scaled that back just a little bit to give us some room because we're still not sure when this housing crisis or the housing bubble, I guess, may burst, not a crisis anymore. But there are indications that other counties around us are seeing huge amounts of growth, as you've seen in the real estate market. But as I said last month, we're still not sure what's going to happen with our commercial real estate, which we've seen those delinquencies, which are higher. So we're going to see how that balances out. So we've had a little bit of an increase due to real estate, but not significant. On the expenditure side, we have had some savings have been added on the personal services because we've had reductions in outcome of the special education audit. We've had significantly way more retirements than were anticipated in the fall. As a comparison in just in severance side of things, while that is an expenditure this year, it will the hiring of those people will save us money down the road. So normally this district spends about $200,000 to $230,000 a year in severance payments, and this year we're at about $400,000 already. So we've had a lot more retirements, as we've kind of talked about, which is helping us save money on the salary side as we bring in new members to the district. The benefit projections have increased to 10% from 9%, and that is, we could potentially have this realized as early as October. One of the things that's been talked about is the addition of whether or not our consortium would be sponsoring gene therapy. That's a hot item right now, where basically what's happening is if gene therapy comes to fruition is that insurance companies won't pay for it. So we as a consortium, though, could decide that we would pay for it out of a separate fund. And so the consortium will be deciding whether we're going to create a separate pot for gene therapy. And one of the examples that they've shared with us is a disease with like hemophilia. And so they're saying that they will have a cure for hemophilia within the next 2 to 3 years. And they already have some things that have been FDA approved. And with that, though, that single dose or single treatment, I guess I should say, for hemophilia would cost anywhere from $3 to $5 million. That again would not be covered by insurance. However, from a cost side, while it may cost us $3 to $5 million as a consortium up front, we don't have that lifelong commitment because it's actually considered a cure. So how much does it cost to treat a patient of hemophilia from the age of 25 to the age of 60 or 65 at retirement? Could be more, and so those are things we're going to be talking about. Okay, so that's why healthcare is currently projected for a 10% increase moving forward. Purchase services, our legal fees have been increased due to some circumstance outside of our control. Supplies continued higher levels of supplies throughout. And again, we did, Mrs. Tomasetti talked about some decrease, although on the flip side of purchase services in savings that she discussed in her special ed audit. And so just some general comments. Again, we've done an excellent job in reining in expenditures and utilizing our federal dollars. We have dramatically improved efficiencies throughout the district as it pertains to our finances, and will continue to drill down into more efficiencies over time. Our salaries and benefits account for a majority of our expenditures and will need to be closely monitored in order to maintain financial success. Most schools should target a total budget of salaries and benefits together of 75%. We'll be reassessing this at the end of this year and the beginning of next year just to see how those severances have impacted that number. But currently, as we started this year, we're sitting at about 85% in salaries and benefits.
Can we jump back one slide?
Sure.
Like what's the percentage that our legal fees have increased, and do we anticipate that to be an ongoing thing?
No, some of it's negotiations as we're in the process of doing that. We did have a couple of cases that were referred, so we're still waiting for some reimbursement amount that have gone actually to litigation. So those have caused some increases in some of the legal fees.
Okay, but you don't have like
It's not going to. It should not be a sustained increase, but I had to increase those for this year and into next year, because we're at the fiscal year cusp. You know what I mean? And some of those bills will continue to trickle in over the next couple of months. And then our new building assumptions. So we've done some preliminary work on this. We're not ready to include it in our forecast. So we'll be drilling down into the new building this summer and actually be including any of those new forecast assumptions into the fall 2021 forecast when we have our staffing much closer to where it needs to be. But we've done some of that preliminary work already, but it doesn't make sense because this is just an update anyways, to include that now because we're not really as finalized yet. So that'll be coming in the fall 2021 forecast to build those assumptions into the new forecast, and we'll see how that affects us. And that's all I have. Any other questions?
Any other questions, any discussion?
Just a housekeeping thing, the forecast update that you gave, maybe when you, can you maybe post it as a PDF?
I will,
so
yeah.
it doesn't-
And I'm going to also I will add the PowerPoints from Bob and yeah, I'll put all of those in there as well tonight.
No, that'd be great.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Item 16, closing items. Announcements? Anybody have any?
Well, yeah, just a quick question. I mean, I know we're at the end of May now, but next school year, are we, when would we be making decisions about the whole protocols with the pandemic, mass in school, 5 days, all of that? I mean, is that to be determined later?
It's a great question. Yes. So what happened this year when Governor DeWine lifted some of the mask requirements or lifts all the health orders on June 2nd? Then when the CDC came out and lifted the mask orders, he then said anybody that wants to lift them as well can lift the mask piece of it before the June 2nd date. So we were, as school people, very excited that we were able to do that. We were going to get parents together and kind of talk about what that would look like. He came back on Saturday after he made that announcement at 10:30 in the morning and said, oh, by the way, this doesn't pertain to schools. All health requirements that were established in a school order on August 20th of 2020 still remain in effect for till whenever you end this school year. So we happen to end on the day that all of the health orders are lifted. Other school districts that go to June 10th, they have to keep all of their health orders in place until the end of their school year. So ours just coincides with the day after. In terms of whether or not they're going to extend that August 20th, 2020 school order into next year remains to be seen. We have no idea. So we can't make decisions about what that's going to look like next year until we see if the governor is going to extend that order from last school year to apply for the fall.
Do we have any indication from the governor on whether or not schools should or could provide remote learning?
So that legislation that allowed us to do it this year, it waived right now, currently under Ohio law, we can provide 3 days of remote. That was relaxed this year so that we could provide a remote option. There has been no discussion as of right now as to whether or not they're going to extend that relaxing of that law to allow us to offer a remote option for next year. So we are planning for 5 full days back for everyone next year as of right now, because we do not have permission, so to speak, to provide a remote option for next year at this time.
Did we send a survey out asking our parents what their thoughts were on that? Because I know in the district I work in, we sent a survey out to the parents. Asking, were you planning on using remote? I'm not saying how we're going to do it or staff it. I'm just saying, did we ask our parents?
We have not, because we don't have the authority just to do that, because we don't have permission to go beyond 3 days of remote learning for next year.
Okay.
They didn't extend the legislation in the next year yet.
Correct.
So we don't know. So if everything were to stay just as it is now and there wasn't any legislative exemption granted for providing 5-day remote learning, and we had to go all day, 5 day, and we decided no mask, it's all going to be back to normal. If somebody wanted remote in that, they would need to go to a remote learning academy, some other organization that provides it as of right now.
As of right now.
So basically, we're gonna revisit this when there's more clarity.
Well, as we get more,
they'll give us more clarity.
Right. If they give us more clarity and when, and we have said to our parents, we're going to be sending emails over the summer, just like we did last summer, just to kind of front load. As soon as we know things, we will let people know. And if there's
decisions that we're allowed to make locally, meaning that they've extended that legislation to allow us to provide remote learning, and or there's something on masks that, we will definitely get that information out to parents as quickly as possible. But our plan as of now, with lack of direction, is to plan that we're going back 5 days, full time for all kids, hopefully with the mask and all the health orders lifted. However, we've learned some very valuable lessons from living through a pandemic. We've upped our cleaning protocols, which will not go away. Some of the hand sanitizers that we have all over the place, and encourage some of those things. We've learned some procedures that have been very helpful in, like, at the high school specifically. Letting kids sit where they want for study hall or for lunch, but having QR codes so we have an automatic attendance of who's sitting around in case we get into a situation. So some of those things that we've learned in those procedures and protocols that we've put in place, we don't want necessarily to go away because they're just good practice. So we'll be using some of those protocols while lifting the ones that we're able to do because of legislation.
I'm just thinking, like, I understand why where I work, they send it out earlier because we would have the information. We're not promising anything. We're just asking, are you intending on using remote? That way, when the legislation does come, we can have those conversations and sit with our teachers or our staff, but it'd be better, seems to me, to be ahead of it than to wait for that legislation to come out that we don't even know. We'd already have the information who would be doing that.
Wouldn't that be confusing, though, to survey our parents and say, are you interested in a remote option that we may or may
Do you
not be
plan
able
on
to?
coming? I forget how it was worded, but it was just like, so we had an actual number.
Right, but by asking the question, are you considering using our remote service? We may not even be legally able to offer a remote service, and we're asking months in advance, are you going to use something we may not even offer or may not even be allowed to offer?
I think it was helpful for staffing reasons. The people who were teaching remote, they knew that there wasn't even enough numbers to do that.
My concern would be some people would be thinking, oh, I wanted remote. Why are you not offering remote?
No, I get that. But if you went to our staff, some of this might actually, it caused people to retire actually, because they saw that wasn't going to be an option next year. So there wasn't even enough to house that. So
we've shared that with our staff. We shared that with our staff that we're planning 5 days full time next year. So, if that was something
that's not an option.
They know our staff is aware of that. We put that out to our parents too, to say, as of right now, this is how we're planning for the fall. So we've covered that with our staff and our parents to let them know. And we've had very little, I think maybe 1 or 2 people who, have stated that, they wish that we would provide a remote option if possible, but that has not been the majority of the feedback that we've gotten from putting that information out about planning for 5 days.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anything else? Our meeting in June is on June 30th. And I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo.